Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple, Human. I'm Lindsey Frances, legacy and wealth psychologist, and we've got a super exciting show today because we're talking about clothes. We're not really. We're talking about tailoring, identity, and communicating your personal style and how you want to feel. And the reason that I've invited the wonderful Nathalie May onto the show today is because I see how important it is that we align how we want to feel with what we're actually putting on our bodies. It's almost as important in your daily habits as what you're putting into your body. What are you putting onto your body and how are you going out into the world? Is it your armour? Is it aligned with who you really want to be? And is it integral to making you feel like a rich and simple human? Gosh, there are so many questions in there. Nathalie, welcome to today's show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. Nathalie and I, if you don't already know, if you haven't recognised us, met through the Mayfair Collective, which I'm going to give a little big up to because it is one of the most exciting network groups in London. Nathalie, you and I have had some amazing conversations. We've met some amazing people, and we are part of a network of ultra high net worth service providers who really do know their craft, and you are one of them. So welcome to today's show. I am so excited to talk to you. And I hope you might let us into some little styling secrets or maybe some celeb gossip at the end. So get ready for me to ask you about that. Nathalie, I'm going to start by asking about you because I really would like to know how you've ended up where you are. You are a bespoke tailoring clothing consultant specialising in women's wear. This is a very unique role. There are not many people doing what you do globally or in the UK. And tailoring, of course, is one of the oldest crafts in the world. Since the days of Adam and Eve, we've been putting garments onto our bodies to cover ourselves up or reveal parts of ourselves. And this is as old as time. I also want to talk about heritage and why this is important in the UK. But before I do, would you mind telling our audience how you fell in love with this particular type of work and how did you develop your skill to the incredibly high level it is today?
Absolutely. Thank you. I started off as a young child being really interested in fashion and putting garments together. Had a fashion wheel. I don't know if you remember those from the 80s. You had a little spinny thing where you could put the skirts and the tops together and then colour them in. And I loved putting different looks together. Did textiles at school and then on to university. I did fashion. I knew I didn't want to sort of sit there sewing all day as much as I love sewing. I couldn't do that kind of 8 hours a day. So I went into sort of more of the marketing and production side of things. And my first real role was working for a bridal wear company. And I did that for 12 years. So it was fitting, selling, buying wedding dresses. It was great fun. Bridal industry is pretty tough. It's very emotional. And I really enjoyed it, but my sort of life took a different direction, and I moved to Brighton, and I ended up not being able to find a role that I wanted in bridal wear, and kind of fell into a role managing a couple of tailoring stores, and the rest is history, as they say.
And what does a normal day or a normal week look like for you?
I'm really lucky. There isn't actually a typical working day or week. Every day is completely different. I could be in London, I could be in Brighton, I could be in Zurich. I will travel to where the client needs me. And I very much look after the background of getting the garments made with the pattern cutters. I oversee all of the work, so I have a very different role when I'm at home, making the garments go through to production, and then obviously fitting, finding clients, networking, meeting new people.
Sounds absolutely fascinating. I know it's something that people are totally intrigued by. Nathalie, most people shop and buy clothes, but very few people actually have themselves styled and tailored. And I think this is something that's very, very unique. It's very, very special for people, but it's also an incredibly luxurious way to really engage in your own personality, your individuality, and your sense of self-expression. There's a real difference between styling yourself and being styled and tailored. Could you explain the difference as you see it? And can you explain why the craft of tailoring really matters so much?
It is completely different. Styling is about putting different looks together, but tailoring is making something that fits you to become part of your body. So styling, it could be putting a nice jacket with a pair of trousers or a skirt or a top. But tailoring is really having something made to fit your body so that it adapts and feels like yourself. They are completely different. There's an element of styling, obviously, within the tailoring, because you're still taking that aspect on board, but they are very different.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a lost art here, because certainly I remember as a young child, if my mother bought a suit, she had it tailored. That was something that she just did, and now we seem to buy a lot more off the peg. We've got fast fashion, multiple collections. I'm sure you remember there was one collection in Marks and Spencer's for the winter and one for the summer. That was it. You didn't keep going back to see what had been refreshed. Times have really, really changed, which I think is such a shame. Can I ask you, when you are involved in constructing a garment, you're overseeing that process, what are you reading about the person beyond just their measurements? What kind of questions are you asking? What are you thinking about?
I'm often asking them how often they're going to be wearing the suit, what they're going to be wearing it to, are they commuting? The suit that you sit in on the train has to fit entirely different to one that you're drinking cocktails in. You need to be able to type, you need to be able to move your arms forward. You cannot do that if you're wearing something very, very tight. It's completely different. If you're in court and you're walking around and you're talking versus being sat down all day, you need garments that will fit you differently. The weight of cloth is really important as well. If you're in an air-conditioned office, sometimes air conditioning can be really cold in an office. A lot of my clients in the Middle East find that they actually buy thicker suits because the air conditioning is so fierce over there that they're really cold at work. Vice versa, the tubes in England, the underground is so hot in the summer and we don't have air conditioning. It's almost the reverse.
I think we can all speak of a time when we've been caught out in the middle of winter. You've got a vest, a jumper, you go and put your suit jacket over the top, perhaps you've got your overcoat on, and then you get on the tube and it's an absolute disaster zone. And then you've got to get to the office or a meeting looking like, you haven't been dragged through a hedge. Of course, you could try and get a taxi or a driver, but you'd be sat in the traffic for even longer. So I love the fact that you're asking those questions. As you've raised it, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the Middle East and the appetite for the kind of work that you do and tailoring and what you've seen happening over the years?
So in the Middle East, there's still a large proportion of clients still wearing suits. Since the pandemic in the UK, a lot of people shied away from suits. So they said, we don't need them anymore. We're not going to the office. Don't need to wear a suit. Don't need this. Don't need that. But in the Middle East, that's just carried on. People are still very formal out there as they are in Japan and Asia, always in a suit. So that's just continued. And often 4 or 5 days a week. They don't have a dress down Friday like we do in the UK. And then, of course, the smart casual in the UK really just bends the rules and people just try and make it more and more casual. But we're fortunate that in the Middle East, there's still a huge client base there. And they like to have an English suit.
Well, I think that speaks to our heritage, because it is an important part of British heritage. And in fact, I've got a very interesting interview coming up with the incoming chair of the felt makers in London, which is going to be super interesting, talking about the heritage of those sorts of trade organisations and how it helps to keep alive the trade, but also how it works in a charitable and a philanthropic setting. So it's a very, very interesting area. These are not my areas of expertise, but they are areas that I'm super interested in, especially when we talk about culture and we talk about inherited capacities and values. It's an interesting thing to be talking about. Nathalie, women in the Middle East, are they also wearing suiting?
Business women are. I think it depends on their culture and their religion, so it will vary wildly. But yes, women are wearing suits and jackets, maybe jackets over a dress, something you can dress up and dress down, or throw a jacket on for the evening. There's still, in some countries, obviously, you need to be covered in some areas. It's respect as well. It's not just going to work and being dressed up.
What are your thoughts? I'm going a bit off piste here, I apologise, but what are your thoughts on sustainability? Because certainly in our lifetime, we've seen fast fashion accelerate into something we could never have even imagined. And I can feel myself, and in fact, there are a few places in London where people are going back to more bespoke, more small batch, sort of less mass produced clothing. What do you see happening and what do you think might happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
People really are starting to care a little bit more about investing in garments, and you do respect your clothing a lot more if you've saved money for it or you've covered with it. You're not going to throw it on the floor. You're not going to throw it on the back of a chair. But that £2 jumper from Primark, you're not going to love that garment. You're just not. You're not going to care for it. You'll just think, oh, I'll chuck it. So I think I'm finding a lot of women are wanting to invest in handbags, shoes, jackets, coats, garments that are going to really last. Correct clothing. I mean, casual wear, you can have some casual wear for the weekend, what have you. But in terms of proper tailoring, you're going to look after that garment and it's going to last. Will last a very long time, but it's also biodegradable, so it's sustainable.
And I think it's also back to our point about being on the tube. It's breathable. It's a far more pleasant fabric. And if you've got a really beautiful silk item, it's so robust and it washes and wears so beautifully. Okay, the ironing can be a bit of a mess, but I always think when I've got a silk blouse, I'm really pleased I bought that as an investment piece. Natalie, I'm super interested in what happens with sustainability, and a lot of my clients do really care about the environment, but yet aren't making the leap between the money they're spending on fashion and clothing and the alternatives. What would you say to people who are beginning to think, oh, this could be for me, or I'm not so sure?
In general, a lot of women don't realise that tailoring is accessible to them. They might spend £5,000 or £6,000 on a Chanel jacket, not realising that it would cost them less to have a jacket made. And I think that's the difference with education. It's not necessarily wanting to buy fast fashion or mass marketed fashion. So many women that I speak to, it might be at a networking event or an evening out, say, "Oh, I like your suit," and I say, "Yes, it's bespoke, it's been made," and they're it's not even on their radar. I have no idea. They say, "Oh, my husband's suit's been made, and he has his suits made." It doesn't occur to them. And it's really nice. I have a male client base as well. I do sell to men. And when I educate the gentlemen on the fact that I do women's wear, they think, oh, that's brilliant. That's Christmas sorted, or a birthday present sorted, because that's such a nice gift to receive.
Yeah, that's beautiful, actually. And we'll talk about the nuts and bolts at the end about working with you. But we were talking a bit about young people and their, the tracksuit and vest top brigade. I mean, my goodness, I've just seen a pair go past in my house today. I'm going to try and cut the legs off. But I do see my own children raid my wardrobe. And certainly I try and do the same if I'm with an older relative. I'm always thinking, what have they got? And I love the idea of having something that stood the test of time that then gets reused or reworked and of course can become a heritage piece. And in fact, we've seen this in some of the British school uniforms. They have heritage blazers that get handed down and handed down and handed down. There's so much history and character in these pieces. What a lovely legacy to leave behind, that you've left some beautiful tailoring that your children, your daughters or your grandchildren or your nieces or your nephews might inherit. What a beautiful thing to think about doing.
First jacket I ever wore to a nightclub was actually my grandmother's. It was a brown velvet jacket. And I loved it. I wore it for years and years, and then eventually, elbows got a bit see-through. But yeah, but this is an example. This is actually a tie brand, and these are vintage ties that have been repurposed. So the lady that I work with, and yeah, she buys vintage ties and repurposes them and adds antique brooches. So that's another example of just repurposing something.
Oh, that sounds absolutely lovely. I mean, I obviously had to really think about how I was going to tie this scarf before I spoke to you. And as I said when we started the call, I was having a real moment. I was like, oh my gosh, what on earth am I going to wear for this show? Not only am I not in my usual studio for various reasons, I'm in a sauna today, but how do you prepare for something like this? But I just love the idea, Natalie. And until we met, I hadn't really explored this concept in terms of identity and legacy. Our clothing is such a big part of that. And when we're talking about building a heritage business, or we're talking about the legacy we want to leave behind, we're talking about inherited wealth all the time. It's something that I deal with in conversation a lot because of the clientele we've got. This is a really essential part. And I think it's gone a little bit perhaps under the radar for many years now. And I hope this is a revival. Would you agree there's a revival coming, or what are you seeing in Europe?
I believe so. There is obviously the mass market produced fashions, but actually, what I'm finding, whether it's for men or women, it's beneficial to stand out sometimes and not be wearing what everybody else is wearing. So, be it a blazer that's been handed down from your grandmother, or a piece of heirloom jewelry. Lots of vintage jewelry around now. A lot of people are going for vintage jewelry, vintage engagement rings that are repurposed instead of a modern cut. And all of that stands out, and it has an emotional attachment to it. A brand new garment doesn't always have that.
No, it doesn't. I think there's history in all of these things. And for anybody listening now who's thinking, oh my gosh, vintage, I just can't bear it. That's where I think bespoke tailoring is such a lovely alternative. I often think, oh, I might try and buy something, perhaps vintage or secondhand. In fact, I've had some incredible successes, but it's always a little bit hit and miss. You're never quite sure if you're getting what you want. But here's an alternative.
I was really lucky to meet somebody at an event last year, and he asked me where my showroom was, and I said it's on Sackville Street. He said, "Oh, I've got to come to you." He said, "I've got a tweed jacket that my father had made back in 1962, made on Sackville Street." And he said, "It's meant to be. I need a new suit." So he came to see us, and it still had show me the label inside, and it had a little hand stitched label that said 19 Sackville Street, which was so lovely. And he was still wearing. I mean, it was falling to bits, but he was still wearing it, and it means a lot to him. I don't. He'll never get rid of it. But that was just lovely.
Isn't that beautiful? And I don't know if you remember, but when I first went to school, the school was just phasing out camel hair coats. It was
Wow.
part of the uniform. And I remember always thinking, I really want one. But actually, the quality of these coats that I remember, it was way beyond anything I've ever seen since. And you wonder what's happened to all of those things, and how wonderful to have had something like that to pass down and hand down to generations.
Another point on that is that we don't look after our clothes like we used to. You used to take off your clothes, you had a clothes brush, everything would be hung up really well on a nice wooden hanger. There would be space in the wardrobe. Now we all have so many clothes, me included. I would hate to show you my clothes rail. Everything is squashed together, and that just doesn't, care for the garment. Camel hair needs looking after. You can't just throw it on a peg and expect it to look nice.
No.
It needs looking
Damp
after.
from the rain, sweaty from the tube, and thinking it's going to last to see your grandchildren's days. That is not going to work. Anybody who has anything hanging around, you might want to deal with that. There's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, but I would really like to know about people who come to you, and we're talking about the sort of ultra high net worth, who could have anything, go anywhere, and buy anything. Why do you think they come to you, and what's that experience like for them, and the relationship that you have with them?
So often I will go to them rather than them come to me, for whatever reason, either too busy with work or for privacy or what have you, or they might be traveling the world. So often I will go and visit them. It could be at home, in a hotel, in an office, on a yacht, anywhere. I've done it all, in an airport. So firstly, I will go to them. They often want to buy something that not everybody else has. If you walk down the street and you have a Gucci label on you, nothing wrong with Gucci, but you're sized up, people know how much you spent on that t-shirt, that pair of trousers. With bespoke tailoring, there is no price tag. You can't be sized up, you can't be priced up. So it's incredibly unique. A lot of high net worths don't really want it all on display, for security reasons. They don't want to be emblazoned with logos and things that's going to give away the fact that they actually do have money. So that's why they like me to come to them. They're not seen out and about. I can be discreet. We don't have to put like any label inside that will tell anyone what anything is. And they often want something different. They won't just necessarily go for a plain navy suit. They'll have something that's not been made before, a particular fabric. I have one client, I go shopping for her cloths. They're not from a particular source. I just go out and I think, well, I know she's going to love that. She's going to love this. So I just buy little pieces and show her.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And I've done several episodes in this recent season on the show about creativity and how because of the way the education has developed, and of course the internet, we're probably less creative now than we ever have been. I've certainly got less friends that are drawing, painting, creating than ever before. It's become, I think, much less popular or attractive or in vogue. I love the idea of working with you, Nathalie, as a creative process. So being able to say to you, actually my favorite colors are X, Y, and Z. And I love the look of some of these people, or I love this style, or I really love this vibe, and being guided. How much help can you give people who come to you and say, I don't really know, or I'm not really sure? How does that conversation go?
So normally I'll start the conversation by finding out what the purpose of the intended garment is. Is it for fun? Is it for work? Obviously, if it's for work, I'll find out what sort of role they do. If they're in court, there's a limited amount of colours and styles that we can go for. If they're on stage, it's something completely different. So a lot of the purpose will tell me what you know how we can move forward in the process. I'll often get an indication, maybe the colour of jewellery that they wear, or they might have an accented colour. You can tell that I like purple today. There's always a hint, even if it's not really obvious. You can sort of tell. I can tell. Sometimes I ask them to take a few pictures or screenshots that kind of like the idea of, or sometimes they'll say, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Melania Trump. I always think she looks amazing. So she's my muse. So
Just wish
often
you'd
people,
smile a bit more, Natalie.
wow,
I
would you
just, I'm,
smile for a
I'm
marriage to him?
well, maybe not, but I'd love to see her look like she was enjoying the fame and fortune. It does look like it might be a trial, although I agree with you. The clothes, chef's
I know.
kiss, absolutely
She looks
spot on.
amazing. There's
She
always a
does.
hint. There's always something that I'll and often a client won't necessarily know themselves, and they might show me, for example, I might get a wedding mood board or something, and there'll be broadly 10 pictures that all look the same, but in their heads they think it all looks different, and I'll think, no, that's a brown tweed with a horn button or what have you. It's easier for an outsider to tell sometimes. It's a bit like if you go to the hairdressers and say, well, I don't know what I want, but the hairdresser says, I know exactly what's going to work.
Yeah, and it works the same in my work, actually, in terms of emotions, emotional granularity. And I always say people turn up to work with me often because, well, they're always running out of energy. That's normally the first giveaway. They want to perform better. But they turn up. Men are often angry. Women are often anxious. And I say, well, that's a great start. What else might be there? I don't know what this feeling is. Okay, well, let's see if we can find it. It's a similar thing when you're in that professional field. I can say to you, oh, it's like a purpley whatever, and you'll be much more on it because you've trained yourself in the granularity of that skill set and that appreciation. Natalie, if somebody comes to you and is well, actually, I would imagine everybody that comes to you has certain feelings about their body. Nobody turns up, whips off, strips down to their underwear, and says, "Look at me, I'm amazing." Yeah, I'm not sure we have many people like that. But how do you deal with those body insecurities, and how does bespoke tailoring help people with their confidence?
A lot of it is about trust. A lot of clients are coming to me for various reasons, and it's often that they can't buy it. Most people's choice would be to buy something off the peg. It's immediate, but of course, a lot of people that are coming to me are because garments don't fit. These patterns that were made for standard size garments were made 200 years ago. We're not that shape anymore. Everybody walks to work. Nobody ate sugar. You might eat once or twice a day. You didn't go to the gym to change your body shape. You didn't lift weights generally. You didn't run. Didn't do ultra marathons. So our body shapes are all quite similar. And so those patterns now don't make any sense. We're just not the same shape. We've managed to change our body shapes for various reasons, through food, through
Mm.
exercise, or lack of. And so most people coming to me will have some kind of form of insecurity. I had a lady recently who came to me and she said, "Oh, I've got a really saggy bum." She didn't actually have a saggy bum. She just had really slim legs. So what was in her head actually wasn't actually correct. But it was just finding a cut of trouser that works on her thighs. She had great legs, really great legs. We've now found a shape that really works on her. But it's just about letting them, they trust me. It's like a hairdresser. You're putting that trust. It's a bit of a therapy session at the same time. And I've dealt with all sorts of body shapes. People that are morbidly obese, people in wheelchairs, all sorts of shapes. And they're coming to me because they want help, and they're letting me in.
Yeah, I mean, you are a very trustworthy person, and I've certainly, spoken to you and felt very at ease. But I am going to segue now slightly into Ozempic, if you don't mind. We are seeing a level of thinness that is extraordinary sometimes in our social circles. Are you seeing that in the work that you do and having to accommodate that at the moment?
We are seeing it. We're seeing it in more men, I would say, than women. Um, and yes, it we're fortunate that our garments can be adjusted, and it depends on the volume of weight loss. Half a stone here, or a stone there. The suits can be adjusted quite easily. I've adjusted suits for people sort of 3 stone as well, but it depends on their frame. Somebody's 6 foot, 6'5", and they lose 3 stone. It's normally fairly even across their body, and so it's very easy to adjust the suit. But if you're someone that's my height, 5'4", if I was to lose 3 stone, that's a huge amount of weight and a lot to take in a small garment. So we are finding it not so much an issue, it's just something to work around. Similarly, people put on weight. It's the other way around as well. It's much easier to put on weight than lose weight. But we can adjust our garments, but there does come a point where you just have to buy a new suit. And actually, some of my clients have lost so much weight, they've actually wanted to upgrade their entire wardrobe because they're no longer that person anymore. They're not having to wear something baggy or saggy, or they want to show off their new shape. And it also will, to some extent, help prevent them putting it back on again. If you've spent 10 and 20, 30,000 pounds reinventing your wardrobe, you're going to make sure it's still going to fit.
I think so. And that was my next question. Are you seeing this as sustainable, or is it too soon to tell?
I've seen some yo-yoing already. I think it's only so good as whilst people are taking it. I think it's a pretty all-off switch. It's down to people, how people adapt to it and whether they go back to their eating habits. It's the same as any diet. If you're on it, great, you'll lose the weight. As soon as you stop, you go back to eating, how you were before, then you're going to put the weight back on. I think there's not enough evidence, I think, yet. But in terms of, I'm often making sure that I don't cut garments too small for someone on a weight loss journey, because sometimes they'll just plateau and they won't lose. They may have been losing a lot, but it might stop. The last thing
Yeah,
we want to do is make something that's too small.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think clothes, like food, are one of the great pleasures. And I love eating. I love being privileged enough to buy beautiful things. And I'm very grateful for living a life where we do have such abundance. I can't imagine life without such a variety of food. I was in London at the weekend and was trying to get as many different cultural food groups in 2 days as possible. I mean, I felt quite sick by the time I left. But it's a great, exciting thing. And when we talked a little bit about buying clothes from different places in the world, I'd love to ask you, Nathalie, what you've seen in your lifetime in terms of global fashion and how things have changed. What would you say about that?
Globally, UK, I mean, I live across the UK and France. I think in the UK, we definitely consume an awful lot more than France. You might notice that as well because you've got the same sort of living
Mm.
arrangement. But definitely the UK is much more of a consumerist setup. Across the board, across food, and clothing, and so far as buying a new car every 5 minutes in the UK, that's not really a norm in France. It's completely different. The Middle East, I think, is probably a bit more like the UK. Dubai is very fast moving. People like to spend money there. I think it depends on in the individual country itself. A lot of the Mediterranean countries are a lot slower. Um, and they tend to invest in clothing, but it's not that fast fashion. I mean, Italians love clothing, but I'm not sure they're buying it every 2 minutes. And I think that's the interesting thing between menswear and women's wear. Men will often shop twice a year but spend an awful lot of money, but women will shop every single weekend.
What do you think about the blurred lines between female and male dressing generally? Because I see, as an older person, a lot more, I suppose, gender neutral dressing, maybe, or fluid dressing, or certainly younger men being far more expressive than traditional times. What do you see happening in your clientele, and has that changed in the last few years?
I think that's quite nice that now you don't really have to necessarily choose whether you're buying a man's suit or a woman's suit. There are obviously technical differences, but often influenced by body shape. I live in Brighton. We have a huge LGBTQ community here, And often we will find men and women not wanting to necessarily look like they're tailored in a man's suit or a woman's suit. And so I can kind of choose what works. But ultimately, we have to choose what fits the body. You can't hide somebody's body shape. But certainly, yeah, people are having fun with fashion. And I think that's really nice. And you can do that with tailoring. We can have a very classic suit. On the whole, people's, business suits are still pretty classic. But it depends on your role.
Of course. I mean, nobody wants to go to work looking like a clown, but you do want to go to work looking like you know what you're doing and what you're talking about. I think this is such an interesting conversation, and it's a lovely, luxurious thought to be having bespoke tailoring as an option for people, but it is much more accessible than people think. Nathalie, what would you say to people who say, oh, I simply don't think this is in my budget, or I don't think it's something I can afford? Is that a misconception?
It is a misconception, but you've got to have the conversation. Often when I sit down with a client, we have 2 or 3 different ways of manufacturing garments. We have made to measure and we have bespoke, and they have different price points. We also do a made to order, which is sort of one step below the made to measure. So there are different price points for different people. And it's about having that conversation. It's like saying, oh, I can't afford a new kitchen. Well, again, kitchen prices could be a couple of £1,000, it could be £10,000, it could be £100,000. It's have the conversation, find out. And it could be that you just start with a nice jacket, and then maybe in a few years' time you add those trousers or have a coat made. The whole point of tailoring is having something that lasts. So you're not going to need to keep buying it at the same rate that you're currently buying it. One of my clients, new client, a couple of months ago, she said to me, I want 6 pairs of black trousers. I said, why on earth do you need 6 pairs of black trousers making? She said, well, because they don't fit. I said, well, you're coming here so that they fit. You don't need 6 pairs. And it was absolutely alien to her. So we started off with 2 pairs. And now we've added a couple of jackets. Now we've added a navy pair, and we've added a few bits and pieces. So we're building on a wardrobe. You don't have to do it all at once. And I always think, buy the best that you can afford at the time. Like buying a house. They always say, stretch yourself, and the rest will come.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And we all know, buy cheap, buy twice. We all do it. And I am absolutely as guilty as the next person. I love a deal. I love a bargain. But I remember, and I've said this on many of my podcasts, I remember my grandmother used to be really articulate about her enthusiasm for buying her new winter coat. And this was something that she really, really looked forward to when this is not from an affluent perspective, but if she had a new coat, this was like a huge thing. I'm buying this new winter coat. And it was a purchase that was very, very significant. And the amount of thought and time and energy and money that went into that decision actually made the rewarding or the purchase seems so much more rewarding, and so much so that I remember it as a child. The new winter coat was a really big thing. Wouldn't it be lovely to feel like that about every piece of clothing that we had?
That's the important thing. When we're making suits or coats or anything, it takes time. It's not that Amazon effect where it arrives the next day. The thing is, you want it the next day, but it takes time, and that actually makes you want it more and more. So yes, you can walk down Regent Street or Bond Street and go into a shop and buy a jacket and have it straight away. And you do get that hit. I'm guilty of having that dopamine hit when I go shopping. But I'm the same. When I commission a new suit, I want it straight away, but I still have to wait 8 to 12 weeks like everybody else.
And I
It
can
makes
tell
you
you
want it more.
absolutely, from a neuroscience perspective, the dopamine hit will be far more significant and long lasting when you do wait, because contrast creates desire. And that's such a wonderful feeling when you finally have it. And I'm just thinking the process all along the way, Nathalie. You're choosing the fabric, you're choosing the cut, they're talking to you. There's a lot in this rather than just clicking on the button. And you know what it's like. In fact, the Ralph Lauren sale, I think, was on one of my apps yesterday. And there I was about to spend several £100s on something I didn't really need, I didn't really like. It probably would have arrived and I would have forgotten all about it. It's so terribly wasteful. I'm so much more excited about this conversation. Nathalie, can I ask you about fabrics, cuts or details that you might feel are underused or underappreciated? Because I'd love you to share things that a truly discerning client might know about from you in terms of those sort of professional
Um,
opinion?
if you're a gentleman, buy 2 pairs of trousers with every suit. And it always seems like an expense at the beginning, but it's cheaper than replacing a whole suit. It will double the life of your suit. It's such a basic thing. But if you're in a suit 4 or 5 days a week, you need to rotate your suits. You can start off with one, but you do need to add. And anybody that thinks that one suit that is going to survive forever when you wear it day in, day out, you have to think of it as a school uniform. I know that's not glamorous, but you have to think of it like that. If you bought your child one school uniform, one shirt, one pair of trousers, and a jumper, how quickly would they go through that? Small things. It's getting your garments looked after properly. Very small things, but they'll make everything last longer.
It's a great insider hack, if you like. And any fabrics that you think, or materials that you think, oh, I wish I saw more of that, or people used it, wore it, or bought it more.
Wool in general is really underrated. It gets such a bad rap by people saying, oh, it's itchy, or it's hot, or it smells, or it's this, or it's that. And it's just complete nonsense. There's so many different types of wool fibers or wool mixes. I'm wearing wool now. You can wear wool in the summer. It's light in the summer. It's warm in the winter. It's completely underrated and the best fiber ever.
It's funny you say that because I was recently on a sheep farm, of course, and having a conversation with the sheep farmer about the value of wool and the fact that it's not being used and synthetic fibers have taken over and the value just isn't there. And he was saying how complicated this is. So I'd love to see a wool revival for anybody out there listening. I wish demand would go up because I think it's still going down, Nathalie, isn't it?
Well, actually, I read a different article this week that said it was going up by 70%. So I think it largely depends on the type of wool. Obviously, wool is all over the world, sheep all over the world, and so are herds, and different wools that come from different types of sheep are used for different things. So, for example, the sheep in the UK, they have a much coarser type of wool, so they'll be used for tweeds, for coats. But as the planet is heating up, people are finding that they're wanting lighter and lighter weight wool. And so the British fleeces are heavy for that.
Yeah, and I think we are beginning to see a return to natural fibres. Certainly, some of the plastic products that we've been clothing our body in, we know aren't really helping us, aren't serving us. So let's hope that we're going to see a massive revival. Wool is so interesting. If anybody is a fan of data and tracks their heart rate variability, I will also tell you I've been experimenting with linen sheets and various other things that are meant to have a different frequency. So actually, wool is a far better fabric to have on your body, as is silk, as is linen. So much better for your human energy field, much better for the resonance in your body, and for all of your cellular activation. So there is science out there. If people are interested, go and buy wool. That is our calling to you today. Nathalie, this is such an interesting conversation, and we're going to come to the close in the show in a minute. But I just want to ask you one slightly, I suppose, tricky question. I'd love to know what separates a really good tailor from an exceptional one, and what has the hardest lesson on your journey been in the work that you do?
I think ultimately, a lot of clients will think of you as a friend in a way. So they're quite happy for you to say, actually, that's not that great on you. Let's try this. That's going to be a terrible, color on you. There's always something better for most clients. It's like going to again, I liken it to the hairdressers, but hairdressers will know exactly what's going to work more than you will. So they're very much in our hands. Honesty is the best policy. Whatever happens, something doesn't always fit first off and it needs another little go. But that is that difference rather than saying, oh no, it's fine, just wear it. If it's not right, it needs a little tweak. Um, a lot of my clients I consider as friends. It goes beyond actually just making their garments. A lot of them we just text, how are you? How's the family? I know everyone's kids, their pets, their relatives, know about where they've been on holiday. I'm in their circle. I'm not just a service provider, and that is the main difference. And going above and beyond, it doesn't matter what the issue is. I've flown over to Paris to collect fabric if there's been a hurry. Sometimes last minute you get weddings where suits are delivered to the wrong places. It's all about getting the client what they want, going that extra mile.
Personal service. And certainly in the work that I do, Nathalie, with family office and trusted advisors, there is a real feeling for individuals that they are a commodity. And when they're shopping, they know that people are on commission. They know that the sales assistants are making money on every purchase the client makes. And that isn't the way that your business works. So it's a very different experience than going into a store and just purchasing. They're actually building a relationship. You are deeply involved, and it's a deeply personal and much respected experience. So I can't encourage people enough. Before I ask you for the details of how to contact you, is there anything we haven't talked about today, Nathalie, that you think, I'd love to share that, or I'd love to give that piece of advice to the person that's stepping perhaps into the bespoke tailoring arena for the first time?
I would say give it a try. Make some phone calls, see who you gel with. It's down to personality as well. There are tailors all over London. There's tailors all over the world. You need to find someone that you just really like. You want to be able to have a conversation with them, an in-depth conversation. Tell them about your wobbly bits, about the bits you don't like, about the bits you do like, the bits you want to show off, how you want to feel. All of that helps. Yeah, so it's a friendship as much as a professional, because you need to be confident to say how you feel. And I think just pick up the phone. I'm quite happy if somebody has a conversation with me, picks up the phone and says, how much is this? How much is that? Because that's often the barrier people are afraid of. But just have a conversation. You can always say no or yes. And most of the time you'll be pleasantly surprised. So many people say, oh, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Which, I think that's a nice testament. And there's always different ways of building your wardrobe, and it doesn't have to be immediate.
One piece at a time, one feeling at a time, one emotion at a time. Well, Nathalie, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. If people would like to find out more about the work that you do, what's the best way of finding you and getting in touch?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Nathalie May. I'm also on Instagram, Taylor M Suits. My email is natalie@fieldingnicholson.com, and my phone numbers are on all three of those. So if you want to pick up the phone and have a chat, then please do.
And I will make sure that we link all of those in the show notes below. Until next time, if you haven't subscribed to the articles or newsletter section of Rich Simple Human, please do so. You will get all of the information about today's show, and you'll also get the edited tips and tricks that we have covered. So you'll get to look at those, and it will help you inform your own personal style. And who knows, it might even encourage you to get in contact with Nathalie and start your bespoke journey, creating a heritage and a legacy in clothing that you will leave behind for years to come. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me here on Rich Simple Human.